Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Church on the Green, located in New Haven, Connecticut. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are invited and welcome. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Church on the Green, please visit our website at unitednewhaven.org. Thank you.
The reading is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 65, verses 17 through 25, which is on page 696 in the Pew Bibles. For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy, and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, and one who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall be the days of my people be. And my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, for they shall be offsprings blessed by the Lord, and their descendants as well. Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear. And the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. But the serpent, its food shall be dust. They shall not hurt or destroy on any all my holy mountain, says the Lord. God is still speaking. Let our hearts be open to listen and understand.
Please join me in prayer. Holy One, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So I've been thinking a lot about time lately because the year is 2019. 2019. Can we just pause and reflect on that for a moment? I suppose that's something I probably should have done like back in January. But for some reason, just recently it hit me, wow, it is 2019, and in just 45 days, it's going to be 2020. 2020 has kind of a nice ring to it. We're going to roar into the 20s. Oh, wait a minute, that's already been used before. Maybe we're going to roll into the 20s. The 20s, finally. At long last, we're going to have an easy way to refer to the decade that we're in. Ever since we said farewell to the 90s and entered this new millennium, we've been wandering through two amoebic and nameless sets of 10 years. Apparently, we could have been saying the aughts and the teens, but let's be real, no one does that. I was born in the 80s and raised in the 90s and made meaning of the decades based on those stereotypical cultural characteristics that made them what they were. So the 50s were the golden age, right? Color TV was invented, Elvis Presley existed, the civil rights movement began. In the 60s, hippies and anti-war protesters came on the scene. Humans were in outer space, and the Beatles were dominating the airwaves. The 70s brought bell-bottoms and pet rocks. Star Wars, disco, and Nixon's resignation. With the 80s came big hair and aerobics Michael Jackson's Thriller and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And the 90s saw the rise of the internet, Britney Spears and boy bands, grunge and rap music. Then came the new millennium and 2 sets of no-name decades. It feels as though the past 19 and a half years have been severed from the previous decades because we don't have a solid nickname for them. It's a relief to finally have a catchy way to refer to the coming decade, the 20s. Though it may take some time for that to sink in, because for me it's still evoking flappers, Art Deco, and the Prohibition era. We'll make it our own in due time. 2020 is approaching, and it's kind of surreal, isn't it? 2020 just sounds so futuristic. I remember being a kid and thinking of the year 2020 as this distant reference point in the far-flung future. And I had a vision of what that future was going to look like, of what the world would be like in 2020. I imagined flying cars and silver spacesuits. Friends, we are just 45 days away from 2020, and I have one question. Where are the flying cars? Right? Where are they? We've made incredible technological progress, but still no flying cars. And the 10-year-old inside me really thought they'd be here by now. I'm ready to soar through the sky in a floating vehicle for my morning commute, preferably one that transforms into a light and easy-to-carry briefcase. Thanks, the Jetsons. As a kid, I imagined a sky filled with flying cars and space needles, with people zipping this way and that way in their silver spacesuits. I envisioned robots, holograms, space stations, teleportation tubes, and laser beams. And by the year 2020, I was sure this imagined future would be a reality. We all have hopes, visions, and dreams for the future, don't we? Sojourner Truth hoped for a future without slavery and subjection of women, which fueled her ministry. Mahatma Gandhi envisioned a future with peace and freedom from oppression in India and dedicated his life towards it. And Martin Luther King Jr. made his dream known from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and his dedication to that dream ignited a movement. The future I hope for has changed since I was a child. As I've learned more about social injustices and oppression and suffering, I envision a world where those are alleviated. I dream of a future with people living in peace and harmony with one another, with other creatures, and with our planet. And, okay, maybe still flying cars. In today's scripture, we learn from the prophet Isaiah about God's hope and vision and dream for the future. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard, or the cry of distress. No more shall an infant live but a few days. One who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth. The future's going to need a much bigger youth group. People that build houses shall inhabit them. People that plant fields shall eat their harvest. No one shall labor in vain or bear children for calamity. This imagined future is born out of the context of Isaiah's time and place. Isaiah lived in the kingdom of Judah in the 8th century BC, so in the ballpark of 2,800 years ago. He is a major prophet in the Old Testament, which means he wrote a whole lot. The book of Isaiah is fascinating because parts of it warn that the kingdoms of Israel and Judah will soon be conquered and brought into exile by neighboring empires. Parts of it are written later from the context of that prophesied exile in Babylon, which indeed comes to pass, and therefore validates Isaiah's prophetic abilities in real time. And parts of it are written even later, after the Babylonian Empire falls and the Israelites are able to return to their homeland. Today's scripture comes from that last portion, when the Israelites are permitted to return from exile to their historical land and set out to rebuild Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. That context can help us to understand the intergenerational trauma experienced by God's people who have been in exile, strangers in a distant land. The words from Isaiah are like a healing balm of hope for the survivors who return to rebuild their ancestral home. Listen again to the prophet Isaiah. For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. The hope and optimism of Isaiah's words are palpable, aren't they? The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. This is the prophet saying, let's look forward to the future of Jerusalem, not backward to our exile in Babylon. Be glad and rejoice. God will create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. It would be no small feat to try to build a ruined city, a ruined temple, a ruined kingdom again. And these words ascribed to the great prophet Isaiah are encouraging and motivating. Now, perhaps Isaiah's hopeful message was indeed effective because over many years, the Jewish people were able to rebuild the temple and Jerusalem. And they remained there living in relative peace for centuries, right up until the time when the Roman Empire invaded and occupied the region and appointed Herod the Great as a vassal king of the Jews. From there, the Gospels pick up the threads of the story of Israel, so stay tuned for Advent and Christmas. Though there was relative peace for Israel over the centuries between Isaiah and Jesus, a time known as the Second Temple period, it certainly was not the utopia prophesied by Isaiah. Infant mortality continued to be a struggle, and folks were not considered 100 to be young. People were not building houses and getting to live in them, or planting fields and getting to eat their fruits. Not during the Second Temple period, and still not really today. It seems God's vision for the future, as presented by Isaiah, has not yet become a reality. People are no closer to happily sharing resources and dismantling injustices than they are to commuting to work with flying cars and silver spacesuits. Why isn't God's vision, as presented by the prophet Isaiah, a reality yet? It's been about 2,800 years. I mean, if you look closely at the words from this week's scripture, it really seems like God was planning to spring right into action. I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. Be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. Friends, I think the key to this passage is this word create. We often refer to the three persons of the Trinity as the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. The general idea is that the Creator fashioned the heavens and the earth. The Redeemer saved us from the forces of death. And the Sustainer abides with us, encouraging, inspiring, and leading us onward. The Trinity is a helpful way for us to attempt to better understand our God, who is too big, too mysterious, too transcendent for us to fully grasp. When we talk about the Trinity as three persons, we hold it in tension with the belief that God is one. And so each person of the Trinity is equally God, one in essence. Christians associate creation with the Creator, the one who designed the universe out of nothing. Theologians use the Latin phrase creatio ex nihilo, or creation out of nothing, to describe what God did at the beginning of time. You know, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth out of a formless void and darkness, God said, "Let there be etc. But the creation that Isaiah is describing is different from the creation presented in Genesis. In the prophet Isaiah's scenario, God is not creating out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo, because something already exists. The ruins of a temple and a city and a kingdom. No, what Isaiah is talking about is creatio continua, or continued creation. God created the heavens and the earth out of nothing. And God's creative work is still continuing, working through what already is. God's continued creation does not destroy the current world, a la Noah's Ark, in favor of starting over from scratch. Instead, God's continued creation builds upon and transforms what is, or perhaps better, who is. The prophet Isaiah says, God will create Jerusalem as a joy and his people as a delight. What this means is that God will work through God's people to create Jerusalem as a joy. And the people themselves will create God's delight. That's an important distinction. As people of God, we cannot sit back idly and passively wait for God to do all of the work for us. In continued creation, God works through us to bring about God's vision for our world. Our God is a creating God who created us as creating creatures. Say that 5 times fast. But really, think about it. We human beings create things, and that is a gift from God. We create societies and governments, homes and schools, businesses, museums and monuments, clothing and accessories, artwork and literature and music, and maybe someday flying cars. Our God is a creating God, and our God is also a redeeming God. The incarnation is an incredible, miraculous, salvational act of God's continued creation. In the Christian tradition, we identify Jesus of Nazareth as the promised one from the prophet Isaiah's words, "The Lord will give you a sign. Behold, a young woman will be with child and bear a son, and shall call him Emmanuel." Emmanuel, God with us. With the incarnation, God's love and devotion for all of creation is made known in the fullest measure. For us, God would go anywhere, even to be so humbled as to live a human life and die a human death. Through the life and ministry of Jesus, we learn so much about God's hope and vision and dream for the future. By following Christ, we participate in God's continued creation. Each small act of discipleship accumulates into something much more powerful with God's grace. Each act of justice we commit, each person we feed or clothe or comfort, each stranger we welcome, each sign of love we show the world, each prayer we lift, each time we offer forgiveness. Our God is a creating God. Our God is a redeeming God. And thankfully, our God is a sustaining God too. We are not expected to bring about God's vision for the future all on our own. God is always with us. Always. God's good spirit guides and inspires, nurtures and nudges, encourages and enlightens, and draws us close to one another and to God. This work needs sustaining because we are in it for the long haul. This work takes decades upon decades, decades with catchy names and nameless decades alike. Heck, it's been 2,800 years since the prophet Isaiah lived, and the injustices he described in the world continue to fester today. Don't get me wrong, there has surely been a lot of amazing progress made. I would not want to trade places with one of Isaiah's listeners from the Iron Age. And it's encouraging to know that the world is on a path that moves towards God's vision. As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So let's help it bend. Let's dedicate our gifts to God's continued creation. Let's vision and hope and dream with God for a world that knows no suffering. Let's be glad and rejoice in what God is creating and redeeming and sustaining through us. Let's be emboldened by the power in each small act of love and compassion and justice that we can offer. This is the work to which we are called as Christians today, tomorrow, and every day. And maybe sometime in the hopefully not too distant future, we can do this work in flying cars and silver spacesuits.